Tell me if this sounds familiar. A post-apocalyptic world ravaged by war on the edge of extinction. Their only hope is for a bunch of wise sages to collect a bunch of magic rocks and recite a bunch of magic words. But the wise sages have all vanished, and instead you have a young boy who was raised by a wise old man, two girls, one being a headstrong genius, and the other an innocent young lady with a heart of gold, and a token wisecracking animal character. But an evil army also wants that power and will stop at nothing to get it. So the group of youngsters have to set out to save the world and stop the evil army. Greetings, mortals! I am Warevo, and today I'm going to be talking about the Granstream Saga. The Granstream Saga was developed in 1997 by Shade as a spiritual successor to the Soul Blazer trilogy on Super Nintendo, sometimes considered to be a fourth installment. While originally published by Sony Computer Entertainment in Japan, this game was released in the US by THQ. Shade is a part of Quintet, who had strong ties with the company Enix, who later joined up with Squaresoft to become Square Enix, who developed the Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy series. I'm approaching this review a little differently than my others. Normally, I go over the graphics and music and all that as I flow through the story and gameplay elements. But I'm saving the story for last. Hang tight and you'll understand why in a bit. The Granstream Saga is an action RPG in a top-down view that feels a lot like Final Fantasy VII, which came out that same year. This game centers around a young man named Eon, who lives with his adopted father Valos, who tells us the game's backstory, which again I'll go over in a bit, in the opening cutscene. Most of the story is told in dialogue boxes, which are standard for the time, but where this game really excels are the anime cutscenes. The cutscenes were made by Production IG, which also did work on the Ghost in the Shell anime franchise, Kill Bill Volume 1, and Eden of the Past. They look stunning, and the voice acting is on par with most animes of the day. It's like watching an actual anime while playing a video game. My favorite part of this game, though, is the soundtrack. The music, for the most part, is incredibly soothing, except for the battle music, which naturally is very fast-paced. The Granstream Saga has a very orchestral soundtrack composed by Kohei Tanaka, Masanori Hikicha, and Takako Ochiai. This is the kind of soundtrack I can find myself very easily falling asleep to. It's very soothing and calm in some areas, and very urgent when it needs to be in other areas. And as mentioned prior, the battle music is also very high-paced and energetic. The graphics, while naturally for the time were incredibly blocky, are also absolutely beautiful, and the environments offer a ton of variety for the relatively small world. There are only a small number of in-game locations, but they managed to do a lot with them. From abandoned temples, towns, and cemeteries, to warships, volcanoes, and castles. The character models, though simple, were spot on for the time and very reminiscent of other games of the era, like Final Fantasy VII or the Phantom Menace. The characters have no faces, but still clearly represent who and what they're supposed to be. The enemies, though technically only having a few general subtypes, also offer a great deal of variety. Though, try to avoid the mimics as much as possible. They're a pain in the butt. That brings me to my next point. The controls. The Granstream Saga has an 8-directional control scheme, with the character movement being done with either the D-pad or the left analog stick. And though it can feel a bit awkward at times, at least it's free from those stupid tank controls like in the Phantom Menace. The camera, like many games at the time, is controlled with the L1 and R1 buttons, which is useful if you find yourself getting stuck and unable to interact with something, though it can often be incredibly disorienting, so I don't end up using it that much. The combat system is also pretty easy to grasp. As soon as you encounter an enemy, the camera shifts from a top-down perspective to a 45-degree perspective. Again, reminiscent of the Phantom Menace. I have a feeling I'll be referencing that game a lot in this video. The process is very simple. Rule number 1. Keep your shield up at all times. When your shield is up, the enemy cannot hurt you, unless it uses one of its magic or special attacks, in which case you're pretty much screwed anyway. Some enemies, especially later in the game, are really frustrating to deal with. Each enemy is different and requires a different strategy. The golems, for example, are slow and can be rushed pretty easily. But what I want to talk about is this guy from Volkos. Herdzod here is what I like to refer to as a walkthrough enemy, because if you're playing the game right, or using a Game Shark like I was, you won't be taking any damage. Well, why is that such a big deal, you ask? This boss has an impenetrable force field, and you can't hurt him. Like, at all. No, you need to let this boss deal damage to you for the sake of the plot. You need to take 2 whole life points worth of damage in order to trigger a cutscene. Then you can fight him. Each continent has a dungeon that you have to find in order to fight a boss to prove yourself worthy of getting the lifting verse for that continent. Each dungeon is a rather simple maze filled with puzzles that, if you pay attention to the characters and find the right objects at the right point in the game, are pretty easy to solve. Once you beat the boss, you can move on to the next continent. But I'll get to the bosses in a minute. Now, before I get started on the plot, I'm going to make one thing perfectly clear. As a kid, the copy I have was damaged. So I was never able to play the whole thing until years later when I finally got it fixed. I mention this because it wasn't until I started playing the game for this review that I realized just how deep and complex this game's lore is. Put on your theorist hats and strap in, because I may be turning into MatPat a few times. The plot for this game is simultaneously ridiculously cliché and intricately well woven. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but I will touch on some of the key points while going over the remainder of the gameplay elements. Over a century ago, there was a war between the Allied Spirit Army and the Imperial Wizardry. The evil Imperial Wizardry used a weapon that submerged the entire planet underwater. But 4 wise men used magic to keep 4 small continents, Shelf, Aquas, Volkos, and Zephyr, from sinking using a magic control tower called Heirloom to make them float. But, as it turns out, the floating magic of Heirloom is temporary and is now beginning to fade as the continents are slowly starting to sink to the sea. So now you have to go on an adventure to save the continents and restore their floating power. Go to the town of Arona and talk to the priest. Then sneak into the basement, where you can find the most powerful weapon in the game, Onimaru. To find Onimaru, you have to use the Panther's Eye item at the top of the stairs. The problem here is that you have to use it in the pixel-perfect spot or you miss it. No second chances, no do-overs, unless you go back to your last save, which was probably back at the Wise Men's Cemetery. Onimaru is pretty much just easy mode. It boosts your attack power all the way up to 250. This makes most of the main enemies in the game pretty easy pickings, but still study their patterns and learn their style, or else you'll end up like me. Or you could do what I eventually did and use Game Shark. Anyway, the pub owner helps you sneak aboard the Jude airship, where you meet Laramie, who's taking a shower. This is my first time seeing a picture of a naked woman in the shower, even if it is incredibly cloudy and obscured from behind. But Laramie helps you sneak onto the Vangel, the Imperial Wizardry's flagship, to rescue Arcia, who happens to be the daughter of the Wise Man of the Wind. Before leaving, you end up with all 4 orbs. Then you're taken to Airlim, the magic control tower, who takes you to all the different continents to solve whatever problems trouble the land and help Arcia recite the lifting verses to make the continents float again. This cycle continues for Shilf, Aquos, and Volcos, but then you come to the land of Zephyr, and here is where the game pitches you your first curveball. Because now, Arcia and Laramie have fallen under a trance, and now you have to go back to all the other continents to find secret temples and solve more puzzles. The first 3 puzzles are easy enough, though the dragons they make you fight are a pain in the butt. But let's talk about the Volcos temple puzzle. In the temples for Shilf, Aquos, and Zephyr, they give you cryptic hints to help you out. But in Volcos, they don't tell you crap. So I'm gonna straight up tell you what you need to do. As soon as you enter, you'll notice 4 rooms and 4 colored circles on the floor. Make a note of the colors of the circles, then go into one of the 4 rooms. As soon as you enter the room, the screen will flash one of 4 colors. Keep that color in mind as you fight the enemy in that room, then go to the circle with that same color and defeat the enemy there. If you match them correctly, the circle will turn black. Repeat that process 3 more times, then you can fight the last dragon. This is where the game's lore starts to go from 0 to 60. Up to this point, the lore came in little bits and pieces, slowly fleshing out the world's story, as well as your own background and the mysterious scepter, a magical object the Eon just has for some reason. But from now on, it starts dumping the deep lore on you like a truck full of drunken monkeys crashing into a banana factory. As you visit each of the secret temples, you learn that many years ago, a sorcerer named Zerouge took over the world and summoned a powerful demon named Ma-O. Zerouge fell in love with a princess, but had her executed. After a long, terrible war, Ma-O Zerouge disappeared. After you finally free your friends from the spell, you sneak into the Imperial Wizardry's hidden fortress, where you fight the supreme ruler of the Imperial Wizardry, Thousand Eyes Joodle Zephyr, where the game cranks the difficulty all the way up to 11. This guy has 4 arms and a long-range attack that absolutely decimates your health. But if you keep your shield up, most of the attacks won't bug you too much. After beating Thousand Eyes Restrict, you can finally save Zephyr, and with all 4 continents now safe at last and the Imperial Wizardry finally defeated, you can finally rest easy. Right? No, as it turns out, the magic of Airlim is temporary, and now you have to go drop yourself into the ocean to restore the Earth to the way it once was. This is where you enter the hardest challenge yet. Remember how earlier I briefly mentioned the story of Ma-O Zerouge? Well, here's where the game shoots you in the balls point-blank range with a sniper rifle. You meet the game's end boss, Dimar, the last Ma-O, who straight up tells you that you are Ma-O Zerouge, or at least his reincarnation, and Arcia is the reincarnation of the princess that he fell in love with. I'm gonna let that soak in for a minute. So now what you get is an endurance round. Make sure you stock up on HP and MP restoring items. You're gonna need them, and you can't go back once you get to this part of the game. You fight 2 knights, then a light dragon, then a dark dragon, who are an absolute pain in the butt to deal with. Especially when the dark dragon does nothing but heal itself. As you finish off each enemy, you get strange audio clips with crap voice acting that's nowhere near the quality of the anime cutscenes. In this last one here, it seems like they weren't even trying.
Souls to me. It is through him that I am able to lure them into my domain and rule them as I wish.
No! No!
But then, while you're down, the game kicks you in the balls yet again. Before you can fight Dimar, you have to make another hard choice. Arguably the hardest choice in the game. You have to sacrifice the soul of the one you love most. Either Laramie or Arcia. Keep that in the back of your mind for now. Fighting Dimar is actually really easy once you get the patterns down. In fact, Dimar is one of the easiest end bosses I've ever faced. Heck, some of the mid-game enemies gave me more trouble than Dimar did. Disappointing, I know. I didn't go into much detail with combat before, so let me talk about a few things. Over the course of the game, you obtain various items and attacks. One item that you need to make sure you get is the Valhalla sword. You won't be using the sword itself, but when you get it, you also unlock a move called the Windbuster, which you can perform by entering up, left, down, right, or a 3/4 counterclockwise turn with the joystick, then attack. One of the most OP combos in the whole game is Onimaru and the Windbuster, which can take out most enemies in one hit. The problem with the Windbuster is that the move only works when it feels like it, though using the left analog stick makes it easier to pull off. Dimar has 4 primary attacks: a mid-air lunge attack where he dives down at you from above, a projectile attack, a pulse wave, and a red crystal. The red crystal will automatically suck you in, so double tap on the D-pad to move away from it. If you get caught in it, he'll freeze, and Dimar will drain your health to replenish his own. Your only opening is when he's on the ground. But when he's on the ground, he's always going to be moving away from you. So make sure you're always moving towards him. The Granstream spell is really handy here, since it drains an entire hit bar if you manage to hit him, making your fight that much faster. Just remember, keep that shield up and keep moving. Once you finally beat him, you get one of 2 endings, depending on who you sacrificed before the fight. That's right, this was the first game I had ever played that had multiple endings. Now, I'm not going to spoil the 2 endings, but I will say, just between you and me, my personal favorite is the Laramie ending. The Granstream Saga is a heavily underrated PS1 gem. Though it lacks the polish of games like Final Fantasy VII, it still holds up in its own right. If they ironed out a few of the flaws and worked on the controls a little bit, it would have done a lot better, I think. Without Onimaru, the later battles get incredibly difficult, and the dragons could be balanced a little bit better. Especially the light and dark dragons at the end. Good God. Overall, the Granstream Saga is a lot of fun, and I do highly recommend it. I'm Revo, thank you so much for joining me, and God bless.